All right, you might want to buckle up for this one. We're diving headfirst into a case. And it proves that even the cuddliest image can hide something truly messed up.
Yeah.
Think Hello Kitty, you know, that little mouthless icon, sweetness itself.
Uh-huh.
Everyone knows her.
Now, jump to 1999. Hong Kong. Same Hello Kitty, but a very different story. Way different.
Okay.
We're talking about a human head sewn inside one. Just let that sink in for a second.
Bro. Inside the doll.
Yeah. Inside the Hello Kitty doll.
It's wild, isn't it? How that symbol, just pure kid-friendly fluff, gets twisted into something so profoundly disturbing.
Exactly.
It's like, I don't know, putting a cartoon character in the middle of a nightmare. The contrast is just so jarring. It tells you how messed up this is going to get.
You totally nailed it. So we're plunging into the Hello Kitty. That's the Hello Kitty hidden corpse case.
Right.
Even the name is enough to give you the heebie-jeebies, right? But the reality, oh man, it's like a nightmare someone added extra horror to and just served it up.
A 23-year-old woman, Fan Man-yi. Her head ends up inside this global symbol of childhood.
Unbelievable.
So our mission today, if you're sticking with us, is to sort of wade through the grim details, try to figure out why this case just exploded like a psychological bomb in Hong Kong, and maybe wrap our heads around the truly bonkers questions it raises. We got a stack of sources here, so let's get into the facts and the freaky context.
Well, and if you look at it, some crimes they burrow into a society's collective mind, don't they?
Totally.
They become these dark legends tied forever to a time and place. And the Hello Kitty part, that's like the brand that just seared this particular case onto Hong Kong's memory.
Absolutely. And to really feel the gut punch of this tragedy, we need to talk about Fan Man-yi.
Okay.
23 years old, working as a nightclub hostess. Life had dealt her a pretty rough hand. Orphanage, homelessness, you know, the works, including struggles with drug addiction, sex work. But here's the real kicker, the part that just twists the knife.
Yeah.
She was fighting to turn her life around. She had a young son.
Right.
She was trying to get clean, build something better for him. And it feels like some sick cosmic joke because those very efforts trying to get straight might have put her right in the path of the absolute monsters who did this.
That really makes you think, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
About how thin that line is for some people, just trying to escape awful situations.
Yeah.
Fan Manny's background, sadly, it made her vulnerable. And her trying to break free might have, inadvertently led her right into this horror. It shines a really harsh light on some tough social realities.
And who were the delightful individuals behind this?
Well, our sources point to three main guys.
Mm-hmm.
Chan Man-lok, he was maybe early to mid-30s then.
Okay.
Leung Wai-lun, barely out of his teens, like early 20s.
So young.
And Leung Sing-cho, maybe mid to late 20s. Oh, and we can't forget the junior member of the crew, a minor known only as Ah Fong, just 13 or 14 years old.
13. Yeah. And these weren't exactly, choir boys. We're talking possible ties to the triads.
Right, the organized crime crew.
Really messed up childhoods, whispers of psychopathy around at least one of them, total lack of empathy.
Mm-hmm.
And with the youngest, Ah Fong, there's this really creepy grooming vibe suggested from one of the older guys. The whole picture is just grim.
That mix, troubled pasts, potential criminal links. It sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Definitely.
And the age range alone is chilling. A young teenager alongside older guys with alleged gang connections. That speaks volumes about the power dynamics in that group and how easily kids can get sucked into extreme violence.
Okay, let's get into the nitty-gritty of the crime itself. So the spark, it seems to have been about money. HK $4,000, apparently, that Fan Man-yi was accused of stealing from Chan Man-lok.
4,000 Hong Kong dollars. That's not a huge amount, relatively speaking.
Right, but he wasn't just after getting his money back. No. He wanted the $4,000 plus an extra 10 grand for his trouble. Ah, okay. So it's punishment, not just repayment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And some sources even hint the motive might have been, uglier than just cash, maybe a sadistic element right from the start. Whatever the full reason, March 17th, 1999, she gets grabbed from her apartment in Kaohsiung.
Okay.
And taken to this apartment in Tsim Sha Tsui. Apparently a well-known spot for drug users to hang out.
Right, a drug den, basically. That immediately paints a picture of a place outside normal rules where terrible things could happen.
And what happened over the next month? It's stomach-churning. From March 17th to roughly mid-April 99, Fan Man-yi went through torture. That sounds like something out of a really bad horror movie.
A whole month.
Yeah, we're talking beatings with metal pipes, being hung up and used like a human punching bag.
Oh, my God.
At one point, they supposedly kicked her in the head around 50 times. 50.
5 times?
They rubbed spices into her open wounds, burned her with candles, melted plastic. Her legs and feet were so bad she couldn't stand.
This is just pure sadism. And hold on, it gets worse. They forced her to consume urine and feces, including apparently from the young girl, Ah Fong.
No.
Yeah. And they'd make her smile and say she was enjoying it. If she didn't, the punishment got worse.
Forcing her to pretend.
Yeah.
That's another level of psychological torture.
There's a suggestion in some sources they might have forced her to take meth, too. The sheer, calculated cruelty is just...
Yeah, peak human garbage.
This kind of prolonged systematic torture. It's not just about pain, is it? It's about completely destroying someone's humanity. Forcing those degrading acts, physically and psychologically. It's about absolute power, absolute control, and that demand to fake enjoyment. That's particularly twisted, designed to break her spirit, feed their own egos, and the possible forced drug use. Just another layer of exploitation, making her even more vulnerable, maybe more compliant. It's vile.
And then, tragically, sometime around April 14th to 16th, 1999, Fan Yai died. From the trauma, the injuries.
After all that, sources describe her body. Swollen, bleeding gums, covered in blisters, festering wounds. Just horrific. But the horror wasn't over.
What else could they possibly do?
After she died, they took her to the bathroom and dismembered her, used a saw.
Oh, God.
Some parts, including her head, were actually cooked in a kerosene stove.
Why?
The sources don't really say why cooked, maybe to make disposal harder to trace. The rest, organs, limbs, they just bagged up in plastic and dumped at different garbage stations around the city, like taking out the trash.
The dismemberment scattering the remains?
Yeah.
That sounds like panic trying to cover their tracks.
Yeah.
But cooking the head, that's different. It feels, I don't know, more disturbing. Hints at something beyond just disposal, maybe some kind of deranged statement. It's just macabre.
And then we get to the detail, the one that makes this case infamous, unforgettable, the Hello Kitty head.
Right.
Fan Manny's partially cooked head was sewn inside a mermaid Hello Kitty doll.
The mermaid one, specific.
Yeah, and it wasn't, neatly done. The doll was apparently crawling with insects, still leaking fluid, and the smell, decay. Just awful.
Okay.
In the end, all the police ever recovered was her head, a single tooth, and some internal organs. That's it.
That image.
Yeah.
The head inside the doll.
Yeah.
It's the ultimate perversion of innocence, isn't it?
Totally.
Grotesque, unforgettable. And the fact it was partially cooked, it just amplifies the brutality, maybe suggests some kind of ritualistic element, even if it doesn't fit the standard serial killer pattern we might talk about later.
So how did this whole nightmare finally come out? It wasn't exactly, brilliant detective work.
No.
About a month after the murder, May 1999, the youngest one, Fong, she started having nightmares, really bad ones.
The psychological toll.
Yeah, vivid, terrifying dreams, visions of Fan Manny demanding her head back. She was completely haunted by it. Eventually, she confessed everything to a social worker at a girls' home she was staying at in Kowloon.
Wow, so her conscience, or just the sheer trauma, finally broke through, especially being so young.
Right. So the social worker, thankfully, called the police on May 24th, 1999.
Okay.
2 days later, the police raided that Simshatsui apartment. Ah Fong apparently guided them, but she was terrified, wouldn't go near the place again.
I wouldn't blame her.
The second they opened the door, they were just hit by this wall of stench, rotting flesh, unmistakable. Inside, they found it. The Hello Kitty doll with the head and the cooking pots, still with remains in them.
Oh, my God.
And here's a weird detail. Neighbors had actually complained about the terrible smell before.
They did?
Yeah, but it was just dismissed as, rotting garbage, normal city smells maybe. One neighbor even supposedly had an audio recording of something suspicious, but the tape somehow got erased.
Erased? That sounds convenient.
Right. So ultimately, it was the youngest perpetrator's breakdown that cracked the case wide open. And get this, there's an unconfirmed rumor, it's in some sources, that the female superintendent who supposedly dismissed those early complaints later committed suicide.
Really? That's, if true, that just adds another layer of tragedy to it all.
Yeah, just a dark footnote.
The fact that complaints were dismissed, though.
Yeah.
It does make you wonder about potential blind spots, maybe biases, especially in areas known for drug activity.
True.
And the case breaking because of Ah Fong's confession.
Yeah.
It really highlights how much chance can play a role in uncovering these extreme crimes. Not brilliant policing, but a psychological collapse within the group itself.
Okay, let's switch gears a bit. Courtroom drama, the aftermath.
Right.
The trial for the three guys, Chan Manlok, Leung Wai-lun, Leung Sing-cho, it kicked off in October 2000.
I'm off on.
Yeah. She was the star witness.
Yeah.
In return for her testimony, she got immunity, a get-out-of-jail-free card, basically.
Must have been incredibly difficult for her.
Yeah.
But crucial for the prosecution.
Oh, absolutely. And can you imagine being in that courtroom? They brought in the actual Hello Kitty doll, Fan Manny's skull, the cooking pot.
Wow.
As evidence.
Yeah. Exhibit A, B, C. Sources even mention this lingering smell of decay in the courtroom itself. Gosh, that must have been intense. A really visceral reminder of the brutality for everyone there. Ah Fong's testimony, even though she was involved, must have been key.
Definitely. So the big legal fight really centered on how Fan Manny died, cause of death.
Okay.
The prosecution argued, obviously, that she was beaten to death horrifically. The defense, though, they tried to argue it was a drug overdose.
Ah, the overdose defense, trying to muddy the waters.
Exactly. But the prosecution pushed back hard. They pointed out that, look, even if there were signs consistent with overdoses, those could also fit with drug withdrawal or just the effects of long-term abuse, especially given the month of torture she'd endured.
Right, the lines could be very blurry after everything she went through.
Yeah. So the judge basically told the jury, you have to be sure, beyond a reasonable doubt. Did the beatings cause her death? That's the bar for murder or even manslaughter.
That makes sense.
So.
Proving direct causation and intent is fundamental in homicide cases.
So in the end, the jury came back with a 6-3 verdict, manslaughter, not murder.
Manslaughter.
Right? Yeah. Because of the dismemberment. They couldn't definitively determine the exact cause of death. It created that crucial reasonable doubt about whether the guys intended to kill her or if the assault was the direct, provable cause of death.
Wow. So the act of dismembering her actually helped them avoid a murder conviction.
Pretty much. It directly hindered the legal process, destroyed key evidence.
That manslaughter verdict, I mean, given the sheer cruelty, it might feel unsatisfying, right?
Yeah.
But it reflects the limits of the legal system. You need that absolute proof.
Yeah.
The dismemberment basically handed the defense the reasonable doubt they needed.
So December 7th, 2000, sentencing day. All three guys, Chan, Long Wai-lun, and Leung Sing-cho, guilty of manslaughter.
But not murder.
Right. The judge, though, he didn't mince words. Called the crime one of the most cruel, depraved, callous, savage, violent, wicked things he'd seen in a Hong Kong court in recent memory. Like peak understatement.
Yeah, sounds like he was disgusted.
And adding to that, psychiatric reports said all three showed zero remorse. None.
Zero remorse? That's chilling, even after everything came out.
So let's break down the sentences because it gets interesting.
The life sentences for manslaughter, even without the murder charge, really show how seriously the judge viewed their actions. And that lack of remorse paints a picture of individuals just profoundly lacking empathy.
Disturbing.
Right. So Chan Manlok, about 33 then, life in prison for manslaughter, plus extra time for unlawful imprisonment, preventing lawful burial, running concurrently. Leung Wai-lun, the younger one, same deal, life for manslaughter, concurrent sentences for the other stuff.
Also life.
Now, Leung Sing-cho, late 20s. Initially, he also got life for manslaughter, plus 6 years for illegal imprisonment, 3 for obstructing burial. But his story takes a turn.
Oh. What about the psych reports on them?
Oh, yeah. Paints a lovely picture. Chan, impulsive, drug user, no sympathy, public menace. Leung Wai-lun, lacked family support, volatile, angry, no empathy, needed therapy. Shocker.
And Leung Sing-cho, this is key, antisocial personality, psychopathic tendencies, easily enraged, vengeful, desensitized to crime due to violence exposure, and a high risk to reoffend. Remember that. High risk.
Okay. That psych evaluation for Leung Sing-cho sounds particularly bad. Yeah. Especially the high risk to reoffend part.
You betcha. So Chan Manlok and Leung Wai-lun tried to appeal their manslaughter convictions, denied, looking at a minimum of 20 years before parole eligibility.
Right.
But Leung Sing-cho, he managed a successful appeal. His case got sent back for retrial.
What happened then?
He pleaded guilty to manslaughter. Claimed he'd found religion in prison, was a changed man. You know the story.
Ah, the prison conversion narrative.
Yep. So in 2004, a judge, while still acknowledging the whole head in a Hello Kitty horror, apparently bought the Remorse Act, knocked his sentence down from life to 18 years.
18 years, down from life.
Yeah. He walked free in April 2014. But wait for it. Here's the kicker. August 2022, he gets arrested again.
Yeah.
Convicted of indecently assaulting a minor, gets another 12 months in jail.
He reoffended, assaulting a minor, after getting released early from a life sentence for that crime.
Yep. The whole thing just makes you seriously question, doesn't it? Can the system actually tell genuine remorse from manipulation? Especially when the initial psych report basically screamed danger.
Lung Sing Shou's case.
Yeah.
Yeah, it throws a huge wrench into the discussion about rehabilitation, especially for individuals with those kind of psychopathic traits noted early on.
Right.
His success will appear based on a claim conversion than reoffending seriously.
Right.
It highlights how incredibly hard it is to assess real change versus just saying the right things. And it must seriously damage public trust in the idea that people capable of such extreme violence can truly be rehabilitated.
Absolutely. Now, this case, it wasn't just legal drama. It tore through Hong Kong society, left a huge mark on the culture.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
The public reaction was just fear, unease. The media went wild, especially during the trial with all those gruesome details coming out daily.
Remember Lun Wai-lun, one of the perpetrators? He actually tried to escape to mainland China after the press in Macau started reporting on the case.
Trying to flee.
Yeah.
Yeah, that shows the notoriety, doesn't it? The intense media coverage, the public horror. It wasn't just another crime story.
No way.
The brutality combined with that bizarre Hello Kitty element, it created this deep public anxiety, tapped into primal fears about safety, about the potential for that kind of violence just lurking under the surface.
And you know what happens with stories like this? It didn't take long to bleed into pop culture.
Oh, yeah, like movies?
Multiple films
Okay.
inspired by the case. Titles like Human Pork Chop, subtle, and The Untold Story 2.
Wow. Okay.
There was even an art exhibition, Hong Kong murder case, that had this surreal piece based on the Hello Kitty incident. The artist actually said the point was to explore the dark side of humanity, critique societal factors. It's just a very fast, maybe kind of queasy cultural digestion of something truly horrific, isn't it?
Right.
Raises ethical questions about representing real suffering.
It does. That rapid adaptation into film and art, it probably reflects a societal need to process such unimaginable events, try to make sense of them through stories.
Maybe.
But, yeah, like you said, there's always that risk of sensationalism, of exploiting the victim's suffering for shock value or entertainment. The artist's intention to explore deeper issues adds complexity, but the line is thin.
And beyond the shock, the case really dragged some uncomfortable social issues out into the open, didn't it?
Like what?
Well, Ah Fong being only 13, Lun Wai-lun also being really young, it sparked worries about, youth violence, kids getting drawn into crime, manipulation by older criminals.
Right, the grooming aspect you mentioned earlier.
Yeah. And the whole drug angle was huge.
Yeah.
The perpetrators were users. Fan Manny might have been forced to use. The apartment was a known drug den. And this was happening when Hong Kong was already getting worried about rising youth drug use.
Okay, so it tapped into existing anxieties.
Plus, you had Chan Man-luk's alleged triad links, the rundown state of the building. It became this grim symbol for a whole mess of linked social problems.
Great.
Interestingly, sources say overall violent crime in Hong Kong was actually decreasing around then, but serious drug offenses were up, and police were actively targeting triad crime. So while there's no, direct line saying this case caused specific law changes right away, it definitely left a deep psychological scar and fueled those ongoing conversations about youth, drugs, gangs, poverty.
That makes sense. The convergence of all those factors, youth crime, drugs, gangs, maybe urban decay, paints a stark picture of the social vulnerabilities that can feed extreme violence.
Yeah.
Even if it didn't lead to immediate legislation, it undoubtedly shaped public discourse and maybe influenced policy thinking down the line.
Now, when you hear a story this brutal, your mind might go to serial killers, right?
The natural comparison, given the extreme violence.
But let's be clear. The usual definition of a serial killer. Multiple victims over time with those cooling off periods in between.
Right.
This case, horrific as it was, involved one victim. Fan Manu.
Okay, so technically not serial killing.
Correct. But it's still kind of darkly fascinating to compare the characteristics of these guys to traits you often see in serial killers.
Yeah, it's useful to look at the psychology and behavior, even if the label doesn't fit. Helps understand the spectrum of violence.
Exactly. So head count, serial killers, usually solo acts, lone wolves. Here, we had a group, 3 main guys, plus Ah Fong, big difference.
The group dynamic, right?
And the initial trigger seemed external. That HK $4,000 debt revenge, though it obviously escalated way beyond that into sadism and control.
Whereas serial killers often have deeper internal psychological drivers, right?
Yeah.
Power, sexual fantasy, compulsion.
Exactly. Their motives are often way more ingrained. And victim selection. Fan Mannion knew them. The crime came from a specific conflict. Serial killers often target strangers who fit some kind of profile tied to their fantasies.
That group dynamic is really key, isn't it? Multiple perpetrators can, like, diffuse responsibility, maybe egg each other on, potentially escalating the violence beyond what one person might do alone.
Good point.
And that initial trigger, the theft, even though the response was insanely brutal, it's different from the purely internally driven urges we often see with serial killers.
Now, if we look inside the psychological, let's call it the toy box of the Hello Kitty crew, based on those reports. Seriously messed up picture. Impulsivity, zero remorse, quick tempers, aggression, empathy, black hole, antisocial tendencies, even psychopathy suggested for one.
Okay, so there are overlaps with traits seen in violent offenders, including some serial killers, early trauma, personality disorders.
Definitely overlap, but the heavy drug abuse in this case seems crucial. Like it lowered inhibitions, maybe fueled the violence in a specific way.
Right, contrasting with serial killers where the drive might be more internal, maybe fantasy-based, less chemically fueled in the moment, perhaps.
Could be. The drug factor here seems pretty central to the whole explosive situation.
Yeah, that's a significant point. The drug abuse as a catalyst might distinguish it from the often meticulously planned, fantasy-driven crimes of many serial killers, even if the underlying psychological traits have some similarities.
And even the crime itself. The long torture, the dismemberment, stuffing the head in the doll.
Yeah.
While it's unbelievably brutal, degrading, it doesn't quite feel like a typical serial killer ritual.
Well, so...
Their rituals are often more formalized, personal, tied directly to their specific fantasies. Here, the dismemberment, as gruesome as it was, seems mostly about disposal, trying to hide the crime.
Okay, so the function might be different, even if the act is horrific.
Yeah. So, wrapping up this grim comparison, the Hello Kitty perpetrator, undeniably monstrous, shared some psych traits with other violent offenders, maybe even some serial killers.
What?
But the case itself, single incident, group effort, specific trigger. It just doesn't fit the serial killer definition or pattern. Yeah. It's more a terrifying example of extreme group violence spiraling out from a relatively petty grievance.
Exactly. It really highlights that extreme cruelty isn't limited to one category, like serial killing. The group dynamic, the specific trigger. Those are the key differences in this truly disturbing case.
So let's try to recap this whole descent into darkness. The Hello Kitty doll.
Yeah.
Or an unimaginable violence, prolonged torture committed by a group, and stamped with that forever unsettling image of the Hello Kitty doll.
Right.
And while the killers shared some dark psychological traits with serial types, the case itself, single victim, group dynamic, doesn't fit that specific grim label. The reason it still haunts Hong Kong while we're talking about it now, it's obvious, isn't it? The sheer depravity, the child involved, the drug connection, and that jarring clash. Innocence and absolute brutality.
What's really striking, I think, is how this case, maybe because it's hard to neatly categorize, continues to fascinate and horrify people.
Yeah.
That unique mix of factors, the mundane trigger that spiraled, the group violence, the symbolic desecration with the doll, it creates this story that just sticks, refuses to fade.
Think about it, yeah. This wasn't just a murder. It was like a deep dive into the potential for human cruelty. So here's maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. Consider how unique this crime is, how it sits outside the usual true crime boxes. What does that reveal about human cruelty, about how individual psychology, group pressure, societal factors can all mix together in the darkest ways?
Yeah.
What does a case like this bizarre, brutal outlier, what does it really tell us about the edges of human behavior? And maybe why these kinds of stories just cling to us, refuse to let go?